Hey, college football fans, I'm Ivan Maisel. On the latest Championship Drive podcast, Penn State upsets Ohio State, and it's the year of the bounce back. To listen to us or subscribe to us, go to the Listen tab of your ESPN app.
Pardon the interruption, but I'm Mike Wilbon. The Cubs are in the World Series for the first time since 1945. Tony, nothing you can say or do can ruin my mood.
I'm Tony Kornheiser. Jay Cutler is back.
Damn you. Raining on my parade. You got it. You had to go there, didn't you?
I think it's great that the Cubs are in the World Series for the first time in ever.
Thank you for your well wishes over the weekend.
Your entire lifetime, you haven't seen them in the World Series.
No,
never.
Now
you get to see them. Welcome to PTI, boys and girls. In today's episode, the Vikings fall, the Tide rolls, and the Chicago Cubs are finally in the World Series. But we begin today with the first tie in the NFL in 4 years. A stultifying, sleep-inducing 6-6 tie between Seattle and Arizona. A game of no offense in which each team missed a short game-winning field goal in overtime, and a game distinguished by Bobby Wagner playing leapfrog on field goals and not being penalized, much to the chagrin of Bruce Arians. Wilbon, which team should feel better about the outcome?
Tony, Seattle should feel better about the outcome because the game was on the road. And while the result is sort of unacceptable to anybody who cares about football, it has to be more unacceptable to the Cardinals, who needed this game. I mean, you got to beat your division rival, your trailing. You need this game to bounce back, to have a win in the win column and division race, all those things. But, Tony, this game was poorly played on so many levels, poorly officiated on so many levels. But there was a certain tension and excitement about it. I watched every snap of it. And you just couldn't believe they couldn't score the chip shot field goals at the end. If you can't make those field goals while guys are making 50-plus every Sunday, what are you doing?
Watching every snap of this, you get a medal or something like a medal because most people just nod it out. I'm going to talk for a second about ratings in football, and the NFL is concerned for ratings. If you're really concerned for ratings, this is why you ought to be concerned. This is Sunday night. This is the biggest stage you have. You didn't plan for the game to be so bad, but the game was so bad. On Thursday night this week, you have Jacksonville at Tennessee, a game that nobody can work up any real excitement for. I'll go to Seattle for a second because you're 100% right. Seattle has the better outcome because they're on the road in division and they did not lose the game. I like Seattle, but, I mean, and there's a but here. The Bobby Wagner stuff, you cannot put your hands on other players to leap up. You have to be penalized.
And you can't get away with it.
And if you are penalized, Arizona retains the ball and probably wins the game. So when Bruce Arians says this, for which he will be fined and shouldn't be fined, he says, quote, we'll get some kind of explanation that is all BS like normal. And he didn't say BS. But that's wrong. That's wrong.
And, Tony, you can see the officials knew they'd blown it, but it's not reviewable by replay. No. So you changed that, but Tony, it was just,
you know what,
it was
Mike,
awful football, but it was sort of compelling. Tony, I've been critical of the season's play.
In overtime, everything should be reviewed.
I'm with you on that.
Yes, in overtime.
Tony, the Vikings would have been happy with that tie yesterday, but they suffered their first defeat of the season in Philly, where Sam Bradford was booed, then bounced around a little bit by the Eagles' defense. Bradford was sacked 6 times, hit 16 more, in a very ungracious homecoming. Tony, does that mean that the Vikings on some level yesterday were exposed?
They were not exposed. They were beat. Minnesota was not going through undefeated. There is zero chance Minnesota would go through undefeated. They have a nice defense. Their offense is at best okay. A couple of numbers are important here. They're 18th in ranked offense in a 32-team league, and they're 31st in yards per game. Even when Sam Bradford is good, they're not a very good offense. And by the way, Sam Bradford, a human ace bandage, cannot get hit like this.
Tony,
he cannot make it through.
I thought about you yesterday. You've been saying this for 3 years. And I thought, my God, if this kid gets hit again, they're going to just wind up getting him out of there.
That's
Look,
right.
When you don't have the offensive lineman you're missing and you're not apparently getting anybody back, and you don't have your future Hall of Fame running back, Adrian Peterson, I don't know how you diversify the offense. You have to continue to depend on the passing game that has done okay so far. But teams they study the film, as they used to say, and they're going to get hip to him, and they're going to load up on him sort of like the Eagles did yesterday. But I thought, I'm like you, Tony. I don't think they were exposed. They just got beat.
Yeah, that's
the problem is, how do they pull out of this?
They're not that good. The larger question here is, what do we make of the Philadelphia Eagles? The Philadelphia Eagles have beaten two good teams. Minnesota's a good team. Pittsburgh Steelers with Ben Roethlisberger is a good team. And they beat them by a combined score of 55-13. At home, they're really good.
At home,
but the
good.
Redskins, they dominated them last week. So, I mean,
well, on
are
the
they
road,
a legitimate well, that's what I'm saying. But this isn't college. You play 8 games on the road in the pros. You have to win.
Tony, you know what happens over the course of time in division play. You know, they get the Eagles again, the Redskins, and they get the Cowboys again, and they get the Giants again, and these things can turn in the second half of the season. But I was more interested in Philly because I thought the Vikings were going to lose that game yesterday, and they did.
By the way, everybody loves Carson Wentz. He had 2 picks, a very ordinary game. If he were a veteran quarterback, people would be screaming for the backup.
Right.
They would. The Atlanta Falcons, here's another team. They were 17 points clear of San Diego in the second quarter yesterday. They were 10 points clear with 6 minutes to go. And somehow San Diego pushed the game into overtime. And in overtime, with a 4th and 1 from his own 45, Atlanta coach Dan Quinn elected to go for it. Quinn said, quote, just a gut feeling that I went with. It didn't work. We can second guess. That's easy to do, but it was more a mindset, unquote. San Diego scored to win on the ensuing possession. Wilbon, are you okay with Dan Quinn going with his gut?
No, and it's not just second guessing. And I'm okay with him going with his gut. But sometimes you have to ignore your gut. And I think it was Moose Johnston calling the action as the analyst on that game yesterday, who in real time, right away said, no, you got to punt the ball and trust your defense. And that's what my gut was telling me. And more importantly, Moose Johnston, who actually got some Super Bowl rings to show what his gut can tell him. Tony, I thought it was a disaster. The 3rd down play went nowhere. The 4th down play. If you're going to trust your gut, be imaginative and daring or bold or something, and don't just plunge in there and get stuffed. It didn't work, and it was bad.
Let's look at Atlanta for a second. 2 weeks ago, they beat Denver in Denver. Last week, they go to Seattle. They don't get a pass interference call on Richard Sherman that they should have gotten, and maybe they win that game. Then they come home, and for a while there, Julio Jones gained 1 million yards. And then not when he had to score touchdowns at the end. San Diego is supposed to lose that game. They just went 2,500 miles. They've lost all the close games all year long. For Atlanta to blow that game, that's a terrible loss. It makes you, Mike, look at the NFC. Who's any good? It looks like Dallas of all teams. They look like the best
Dallas
team.
is the best team.
Because they were on a bye week, so they look better than anybody else.
They didn't get to lose. Tony, I'm with you on this. Atlanta comes home, and they ought to be angry that they got hosed last week out in Seattle.
Yeah.
And they should have come. I think that league got up to 17 points at one juncture. You have to come in and pound San Diego and make them pay, and they didn't do it. They reverted to type. They look like Atlanta from the last 5 years that gets out early and comes back.
And by the way, to amplify the Dan Quinn moment there, you're in overtime. If they score on the next possession, you lose, which is what happened. Kick the ball.
Yeah.
Kick the ball.
That wasn't that hard to call. Tony, there was a seismic happening in college football on Saturday night. And, of course, I'm talking about Ohio State's loss at Penn State. Now, certain fanatics will tell you that Urban Meyer's first road loss since becoming coach of the Buckeyes isn't a season killer. But Alabama kept rolling. The Tide beat a really good Texas A&M team. You know what this combination does, Tone. It leads the great declarers to say, nobody out there can touch Nick Saban and his boys. And you say what?
I say exactly what Booger McFarland said on this particular show on Friday. Nobody can touch Nick Saban and his boys.
Wrong.
That's exactly what he said. What you have now is a circumstance in which if Michigan goes to Ohio State and wins in Ohio State, they have real credential as a team that could win. Perhaps Washington. It's in the Pac-12. People don't see them. They're at Utah this week. That's a tough game.
That's a good game.
If they're impressive there. Nebraska has to go at Wisconsin this week. So it leaves you pretty much the winner of Ohio State and Michigan and Clemson. And Clemson's been there before.
Clemson's there?
These are two teams that you would say to yourself, they have a chance. But right now, the way I look at it, I watched that whole game. I think Alabama is number one by a sizable margin. I do.
Tony, I didn't watch the whole game because I was sort of getting ready for the revelry at Wrigley. So I didn't watch the whole game. But I've watched Ohio State enough to know that they were in trouble coming in. 2 weeks in a row, they were flirting with disaster. I wish they'd avoided disaster until next week when a certain purple and white team is in Columbus. Nevertheless, they've been flirting with it. They're not as good as they usually are.
Okay.
Michigan looks like it could be. Washington, yes, Tony.
Right.
Clemson, yes. I'm not about to declare that Alabama's untouchable. Tony, not only that, you know what the SEC schedule does. It beats a team down by the last couple of weeks of the regular season.
No, you're right.
And the SEC title game.
And they've got to go to LSU with Leonard Fournette now, and that is a very tough game to win. But what is also true over the years, the last couple of years, you can get in with one loss. Ohio State can get back in this.
No,
if they beat Michigan,
they've looked shaky 3 straight weeks.
If they beat Michigan by 25 points, they're
not
back in
doing that. That's not happening.
All right, Wilbon, we have made you wait this long, so now we will get to the Cubs. The World Series starts tomorrow night in Cleveland, and for the first time in 71 years, that's a long time, the Cubs are in it. Given the dominant season the Cubs had, would it be a failure if the Cubs do not win the World Series?
Not to me. Maybe to a lot of people. Maybe the guys on that team, Tony, but not to me. And I suspect a lot of others who have never, as you just said, seen the Cubs get to the World Series. In professional sports in North America, the 4 primary team sports, no team ever went 71 years without getting to its league's championship. Nobody ever. They just did this. Now, do I want them to win? God, yes, I want them to win. And as I'm trying to think, Rizzo said to me on the field right afterward, we are so glad we have gotten rid of this 70-year drought. Now we want to get rid of the 108-year. And I think those guys are determined to not let this be the crowning glory of their year and have a butt at the end of it. It's hard. Cleveland's good. But, Tony, no, I'm not going to declare this a failure if the Cubs don't win the series.
I'm going to say this unequivocally. It will be a failure. It won't be a colossal failure. It'll be a failure because, as I've told you from day one of this season, the Cubs are the best team in baseball. They are the 1927 Yankees. Cleveland is a very nice team. Cleveland is plus 101 in differential. The Cubs are plus 252, by far the best in baseball. They can hit. Their starting pitching is significantly better, I believe, than Cleveland's.
Depends on who they get eligible. Depends on who's back.
I believe that they are by far the best team in baseball. And I know what you're going to say. That doesn't mean they're going to win.
Doesn't matter.
And it doesn't mean that they're going to win. But this is their year to me. It's their year.
Tony, it looks like it. Everything is pointing to that. When you texted me the other night, early in the game, preposterously early, because of the double play started by Baez, you turned out to be right. You were in bed. You didn't even know if there was tension or not. They could have lost the game the next day, and you would have said, oops. You've been right so far. I hope you're right one more round. But, Tony, Cleveland's got its own magical summer going on. The Cubs aren't alone in that.
And you're right. But we made a living for a long time as columnists picking the best column. Cleveland is a good column. Yeah. The Cubs are the best column.
It's a great run, and to get rid of the Dodgers the way they did by beating the greatest regular season pitcher in some time now.
That's right.
All of that was breathtaking, Tony, and now you start anew.
Let's take a break. Coming up, should Ryan Fitzpatrick have really called out his owner for a lack of support?
And why is Jeff Fisher refusing to put number 1 pick Jared Goff into the game?
This is a very simple answer, some of which can't be used on TV, but everybody knows this answer.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
College football lives here. The Florida Gators sit high atop the SEC East, allowing only 12 points a game. Second in the nation. This week it's the annual showdown with Georgia in Jacksonville, one of the most prominent rivalry games in college football.
3rd and 4, here comes the blitz. Intercepted!
Coverage begins Saturday at 2:30 Eastern on ESPN Radio.
Mail time, and today, if we read yours on the air, Wilbon will send you his seats to the World Series.
That
is unbelievably
way too expensive. $4,000 a shot, Tony. That's TK money right there.
More deflating loss, Redskins or Bills?
Well, Tony, I mean, we're comparing these two because they both came into the weekend having won 4 consecutive games. Both played on the road. The Redskins in Detroit. Buffalo had a division game in Miami, and I thought, to tell you the truth, that the Redskins' loss was worse. I know they don't own the Lions like they used to, but they scored late in that game. Your quarterback had gotten over some earlier mistakes, made a brilliant run after a fake to get in and get the Redskins a lead, and they gave it up in no time. I thought a division game with Buffalo, Miami is going to be tougher. I'm going to say the Redskins had the worst loss of those two.
This is not even close. Buffalo was not leading that game in Miami late. The Redskins, on a Kirk Cousins 19-yard run, took the lead with 1:05 to go, 65 seconds to go, and you can't score a field goal to tie because it's a 4-point game. Matthew Stafford went 75 yards in 49 seconds. Let me repeat that. 49 seconds. Then he finds 90-year-old Anquan Bolden on a three, and he goes in.
Play.
That loss was awful.
I know that was hurtful for you Redskin fans, all of you Randy Redskin.
Is Ryan Fitzpatrick right to feel aggrieved?
Please, with Ryan Fitzpatrick, who I actually like, Tony, and root for. But now he's going to the GM and the owner, when they lose faith in you, you're the only one. You've got to have faith in yourself. And says that he's been on an island, and now he's going to play angry. To which Todd Bowles, his coach, says if anger is going to cut down on some of those turnovers you've been making going back to last season, then play angry. Tony, they don't have faith because he hasn't justified it.
That's right.
He hasn't played well enough to have faith. So if he wants to play angry, good. I like Ryan Fitzpatrick. I hope he rebounds. And now the backup has got a torn ACL. They got to put him back in there. Play better.
I like him, too. I watched him play in college. I understand why he's aggrieved, but he brought this on himself. In the second halves of games this year, he had 0 touchdown passes and 10 picks. He's aggrieved because they put Geno Smith, who was a disaster, in the game. And he went,
not anymore.
Geno Smith, really? Well, now Geno Smith is out again with an ACL. So you're stuck with Ryan Fitzpatrick. But
play better.
He's right. The owner, the coach, and the GM gave up on him because he made them give up on him.
There's no reason, because he's a turnover machine. Stop turning it over.
Yes.
Why won't Jeff Fisher turn to Jared Goff?
Well, I mean, Fisher's been very clear about this. He doesn't think Goff is ready, Tony. And I know Goff is the overall number one guy, and people want him in there, especially when Case Keenum puts up 4 interceptions. But, you know, if he's not ready and the coach thinks he's not, everybody doesn't have to go in for playing the rookie from day one because of financial reasons.
Case Keenum is not very good. And that's the kindest I'm going to say, that he's just not very good. He was terrible in this particular game. They don't turn to Jared Goff because they think he stinks. This is a very simple thing. It doesn't go any further than that. He's the overall number 1 pick in the draft.
He's not ready.
And the coach and the GM wanted to have him. And you look around the league, Carson Wentz is the overall number 2, and he plays all the time. Dak Prescott is a 4th rounder, and he plays all the time now. Kevin Hogan played a lot of minutes for Cleveland yesterday, and he's a 5th rounder. If you can't put Jared Goff, and what you're afraid of is he'll be bad and he'll never play.
You'll ruin him.
He'll never play.
But
so
Tony,
that's why.
Tony, they don't have to follow the leader out in L.A. They can make their own judgment on whether they think their guy is ready or not.
Fine, but Case Keenum has not been distinguished. I think that's fair to say.
That's fair.
How much credit does Jarvis Landry deserve for his apology?
I don't know about credit for an apology. Players apologize all the time after they smack somebody. This is a crackback block that Jarvis Landry throws on Aaron Williams. And Aaron Williams, Tony, the big problem here is, he had a serious neck injury and almost lost his career before. And Jarvis Landry, afterward, he goes over to him, puts his arm around him, and says, if I could have that hit back, I would. Fine, but you don't have to feel that way. It's football. If the other guy knows he's going to get hit, either give up the career when you get the neck injury or go play golf. This is football. You can't sanitize it.
Jarvis Landry blocked him viciously. He was flagged for it correctly. He left his feet and slammed into the guy's head. Now, he didn't have to apologize because nobody has to apologize.
No.
At least what he didn't say is, I'm sorry if some of you people were offended by this. And he didn't say, well, the media twisted my words around.
Right.
He had an honest, heartfelt apology saying he'd take it back. It's a terrible thing he did, but at least he apologized correctly, I felt.
It's football. You hit people hard.
Enough email. Let's take one last break. Still to come, Leonard Fournette returns and immediately reminds us what we were missing.
And how should you feel if you throw for more than 700 yards in a game and still lose?
Matthew Stafford went 75 yards in 49 seconds.
The anger, the steam is still coming out of your head.
Number
Redskins
one overall.
Lose. Oh, no.
That's why he's number 1 overall when he was.
College football lives here. Thursday night in the Pac-12, Cal heads to the Coliseum to face USC.
Airs it out down the left side of the field. Jump ball picked off!
The Golden Bears' high-powered offense is top 10 in the nation in passing yards and points scored. Can USC slow them down in their quest to defend their Pac-12 South title?
Touchdown, USC!
Find out Thursday night at 9:30 Eastern on ESPN Radio. Presented by Dr. Pepper.
Happy time, people. Happy 90th birthday, Y.A. Tittle.
Wow.
The Y.A. stands for Yelverton Abraham. Tittle was an all-pro quarterback for the 49ers and the Giants. He's a 3-time MVP, and he is the subject of one of the most famous sports photographs in history as he knelt on the ground after being sacked, a thin river of blood falling down his forehead.
1964 photo from the Steelers, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Photographer, only Marv Levy and Charlie Trippi, as far as we can tell, Tony, are older members of the Hall of Fame, older living members.
Not so happy anniversary, Roger Clemens. On this day 16 years ago, you were fined $50,000 for throwing the jagged barrel of Mike Piazza's bat in his direction in the World Series. The irony in this is that Piazza is in the Hall of Fame ahead of Clemens. Piazza was a terrific player about whom there was a whisper campaign concerning steroids. Clemens is an all-time player whose steroid use is generally accepted, though he has always denied it.
Tony, I mean, this was a while ago, but who did you root for in that Subway Series? I mean, the Mets were the team of the youth. Who did you root
Mets.
for?
Mets was my team as a kid. Happy trails to this Ole Miss defender. Deontay Anderson makes the freshman mistake of getting in the way of Leonard Fournette on Saturday night. The result is that Anderson crumbles like paper as Fournette runs right over him. The last time we saw a hit like this was South Carolina's Jadeveon Clowney burying a Michigan running back in a New Year's Day bowl game in 2013.
You want to penalize him for running that guy over since you become Mr. Softy now? That's football. He ran him over. You want to give him 15?
Not a crackback block where you leave your feet and try to injure. It's not the same thing. One error, the Seahawks-Cardinals game was the first tie in 2 years, not 4. I take ownership of that. It's my bad. Let's go to the big finish.
Let's do it.
The Vertical reports that the NBA and players have agreed on major issues in a proposed 7-year extension of their CBA. Is that significant?
Yes, no work stoppage at a time where the general public doesn't want to hear that people aren't making enough money on either side. Texas Tech quarterback Pat Mahomes II threw 88 times for 734 yards, 5 TDs, and lost. How should he feel?
Exhausted. 88 passes. What a game that must have been, Oklahoma and Texas Tech. The Raiders are 5-2. Are you a believer?
Just about, Tony. I mean, I'm an Alex Smith guy. I root for him in Kansas City, but the Raiders look good. It's good for the league. Gary Player tweeted out a photo of himself and Yao Ming. Look at this. Your reaction?
That they're in different species. Honey, I shrunk the golfer. How could that be possible? How?
That's unbelievable.
Last one.
Really
Texans at Broncos tonight. Who you got?
I got to watch.
Yeah. Who you got?
Broncos start to right the ship behind the Northwestern quarterback.
We're out of time. We'll try and do better the next time, and I'm Tony Kornheiser.
You didn't mention my boys beating Indiana in this show either. You better get with the program. I'm Mike Wilbon. Same time tomorrow, Knuckleheads. Check out the podcast on iTunes.
Christopher Hayes, shout-outs. A very nice letter to me and Wilbon. Thank you.
LeBron, Kyrie, Kevin Love, and the Cavs begin their title defense against Carmelo, D. Rose, and the Knicks.
Coverage begins Tuesday at 6:30 Eastern on ESPN Radio and now on the ESPN